A poor girl struggles with her dress, and the billionaire CEO falls madly in love. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. The morning wind still clung to the city's skyline, like the last breath of sleep. But Lily Collins wasn't walking. She was sprinting, flat out, desperate, and slightly falling apart. Her old ballet flats were slipping off her heels with every step. The fabric tote bag slung across her shoulder had split at the seam, dangling like a loose tooth, and the dress, dear God, the dress, was on backwards. The zipper was fully exposed across her chest. The price tag stuck dead center like a "Hello, I'm unemployed" sticker, and the neckline was riding high on the wrong side. Her phone buzzed furiously. One glance told her it was Megan, her best friend and unofficial life coach, firing off what felt like emergency broadcast messages. "Lily, if you don't get here in 5 minutes, the job's gone." Breathless and red-faced, Lily muttered under her breath as she pounded the pavement. "I can survive hunger, I can survive humiliation, but I can't miss my one shot at a real job after 3 months of nothing." She rounded a corner, nearly crashing into a man walking a poodle, and spotted it. Smith Global. The building stood like a giant shard of glass, glimmering and smug in the early sun. Its surface mirrored everything, including her. Lily came to a screeching halt. The reflection was undeniable. Her dress was a catastrophe, her hair a wild halo of stubborn curls. Her entire appearance screamed, "I don't belong here." But instead of collapsing, she launched into a frantic attempt to fix it. She twisted around, yanked at the hem, tore at the tag with her teeth, and performed what could only be described as interpretive dance meets wardrobe malfunction right there on the sidewalk. Pedestrians slowed. Some smirked, a few stared. One took out a phone. But Lily didn't care. She had 2 minutes left, and a tiny, ridiculous hope that maybe, just maybe, this interview could change her life. She took a breath. A long one. Then shoved open the heavy glass doors of Smith Global like she belonged there, even if every piece of her outfit insisted otherwise. The 10th floor of Smith Global wasn't just an executive space. It was a quiet, glass-encased kingdom designed for people who didn't raise their voices, didn't spill their coffee, and certainly didn't waste time looking out the window. But Nicholas Smith did. Every morning. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window like clockwork, coffee in hand, back straight, gaze steady. Not because he admired the view. He didn't care much for skylines or street art. No, he looked out as a habit, a moment of control before the day began. 10 minutes of silence before the meetings, mergers, and multi-million-dollar decisions took over. That morning, something strange caught his eye. Across the street, just outside the building's main entrance, a young woman was spinning in confused little circles. Nicholas squinted. She wasn't lost. She was fighting with something. It took a second for him to realize. She was wrestling her dress. No, not just wrestling. She was in an all-out battle. The zipper was in the front. The tag flapped on her chest like a white flag. Her shoe kept flopping off. She tried to bite something. Was that a clothing label? Nicholas blinked. Was she trying to eat the tag off? She looked like she'd walked straight out of a screwball comedy and crash-landed into corporate Midtown. He tilted his head slightly, puzzled. And then, without warning, it happened. Nicholas laughed. Not a quiet chuckle. Not a polite exhale. A real, honest-to-God laugh. It burst out of him, caught him completely off guard. It was sharp and full and loud enough that it echoed through the glass-walled office. Down the hall, an assistant froze mid-step. A junior analyst peered nervously over the top of her cubicle. In 6 years, no one, not a single soul, had ever heard Nicholas Smith laugh like that. Some even questioned if he still knew how. He tried to stifle it, pressing a hand to his mouth, but the image of the girl below, twisting, tugging, looking like she was fighting off a fashion poltergeist, only made it worse. "That's not fixing a dress," he said under his breath, smiling. "That's hand-to-hand combat with a designer disaster." Just then, Ethan stepped into the room, tablet in hand, looking every bit the efficient, put-together assistant. "Sir, are you all right?" Nicholas pointed to the large monitor on the side wall, which displayed the lobby's security feed. He tapped the screen, zooming in on the girl now pacing just outside the revolving doors. "Who is she?" he asked. Ethan looked, then shrugged. "No idea. Maybe a walk-in candidate?" Nicholas sipped his coffee again, barely suppressing another grin. "Cancel the 8 o'clock, he said. "Sir? I'm going downstairs," Nicholas said simply, setting his cup aside. "I want to meet the woman who just made me laugh before sunrise." And with that, the man known for his composure, his discipline, and his absolute emotional control walked out of his office to follow a girl in a backwards dress who had no idea her morning meltdown had just cracked open the armor of one of the most untouchable men in the city. The lobby of Smith Global felt more like the entrance to a luxury museum than a place of employment. Everything shimmered. Marble floors, mirrored walls, even the staff. So polished they seemed like they'd been airbrushed into existence. Lily Collins stepped inside, trying to quiet the pounding in her chest. One shoe kept slapping the floor with an embarrassing flap-flap, and she was fairly certain her dress was still halfway on backwards despite her best sidewalk wrestling attempt. But she faked a smile and marched forward like she belonged. "Good morning. I'm here for the assistant interview," she said, voice tight and breathless. The receptionist didn't even glance up. "Name?" "Lily Collins." 25th floor, the woman replied, gesturing sharply with a manicured nail as if flicking a fly off the counter. Lily nodded, smiled politely, and walked toward the elevator like a deer approaching a firing squad. She whispered to herself, "Okay, head high. Don't trip. Smile, you got this." The elevator dinged. She stepped in, turned around, took a breath, and slammed into a wall, only it wasn't a wall. It was a man. A very solid, very tall man. Her coffee went flying, straight onto the crisp white dress shirt he was wearing. Time paused. Lily stared, horrified, as dark brown liquid spread across his chest like a slow, deliberate disaster. The cup clattered to the floor. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, diving into her purse. "I'll pay for it. Here, will $20 cover it?" she added, holding out a crumpled bill like it might save her from a lawsuit. The man looked down at his shirt, then at the bill, then at her. He didn't speak, just raised an eyebrow with the kind of composure that said he'd seen worse, though possibly not today. "Or 5 installments?" Lily blurted. "And maybe a latte on the house?" She laughed nervously, cheeks on fire. Still silent, he stepped out of the elevator. And just like that, the doors slid shut, leaving her standing alone with the scent of scorched caffeine and shame. "Fantastic," she muttered. "I just ruined a shirt that probably costs more than my credit score." By the time her name was called upstairs for the interview, Lily had convinced herself that the worst had already happened. Surely it couldn't go downhill from here. She opened the door to the conference room with shaky hands. 3 interviewers sat behind a long glass table, her resume in front of them, water glasses perfectly aligned, a quiet tension in the air. But Lily didn't see any of that. Her eyes went straight to the man sitting at the head of the table. Different shirt, same face, same eyes. It was him. Coffee guy. He looked up, expression unreadable. "Miss Collins, correct?" he said, his tone calm, professional, betraying nothing of their earlier collision. She swallowed. "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice 2 pitches too high. Then, under her breath, she mumbled, "Coffee girl." He didn't flinch, didn't smirk. just nodded. "Let's begin." And that was it. A moment in an elevator, a ruined shirt, a $20 apology. And now, here they were, face to face again. Two people from opposite worlds, unknowingly stepping onto the same strange path. The first thread between them had just been tied, and neither of them had the slightest idea where it would lead. Lily Collins stepped into the conference room like someone who had just escaped a high-speed chase. Her back was damp with sweat, her hair resembled a wild bird's nest, and her dress still hadn't fully recovered from the earlier street battle. Across the sleek glass table sat 3 people. One woman whose bun was pulled so tight it looked glued in place, one older man with silver hair and a trench coat demeanor like he walked off the set of a crime show, and one younger guy nervously clicking his pen, either from anxiety or sheer survival mode. At the head of the table sat him, Nicholas, the coffee guy, the CEO. Lily, in that moment, had only one word in her mind: run, but it was far too late. "Miss Collins," the bun woman said in a tone that could curdle milk, "we'll begin with your introduction." Lily nodded, swallowing the rock in her throat. She inhaled, exhaled, then smiled like someone who had just won the lottery on live TV. "Hi, I'm Lily Collins. I love learning new things and ding!" Her phone lit up in her bag, blaring a horrifying remix of Happy Birthday mixed with ambulance sirens, courtesy of Megan, her best friend and chaos enabler. Everyone froze. Lily panicked. She fumbled in her bag, pressing buttons like she was trying to defuse a bomb, but instead of silencing it, she accidentally answered the call. "Girl, did you get in? Did you spill anything yet?" Megan. Full volume, echoing across the glass walls like a karaoke speaker in hell. Lily slapped the phone face down on the table, then picked it back up, then slapped it again. Finally, she managed to hang up, like she was wrestling a greased fish. "I'm sorry," she muttered, smiling weakly. "My friend thinks I died. It's a protocol thing." Silence. "Right," the silver-haired man muttered, adjusting his glasses. "Why don't you tell us your top 3 strengths?" Lily sat up straighter, trying to recover. Just as she opened her mouth, her bobby pin popped loose. The neckline of her dress dropped slightly, revealing a whole new asymmetrical disaster. "Adaptability?" she offered. "Improvisation, like right now." No one blinked. Trying to own the moment, she added, "For example, the pin that held my dress together also works great for bundling paper. Dual-purpose solutions, that's me." She grinned so hard even her teeth were trying to escape. Nicholas said nothing. Just watched. Then, because life wasn't done with her yet, a soft gust of air floated in through the cracked door, and her printed resume, the only copy she had, lifted into the air like a dove and disappeared straight into the wall vent. Lily stood up, lunged forward, and tripped over a chair leg. Her outstretched arm hit a water glass, spilling it all over the silver-haired man's notes. "I'll clean that!" she gasped, digging into her purse and pulling out the nearest paper she could find. But it wasn't a tissue. It was her handwritten shopping list, bold and unmissable. Strong laxatives, sanitary pads, stress chocolate, anti-chafing cream. She froze, looked at the paper, looked at the panel, and then kept wiping. "I'm very organized," she offered, voice barely a whisper. The bun woman gripped her pen like it was a weapon. The silver-haired man silently lifted the soaked paper off his notes. The pen-clicking guy stopped clicking. Silence thickened, like pudding left too long on the stove. And then, suddenly, Nicholas stood up. He looked around the room, then directly at Lily. "She's hired." The 3 interviewers whipped their heads toward him in unison. "Excuse me?" Nicholas replied calmly, evenly. She's exactly what this company needs. Creativity, courage, and the rare ability to turn an interview into something unforgettable. Lily stared up at him, eyes wide. "Welcome to Smith Global, Miss Collins," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Lily, still holding the shopping list, blinked, then stammered, "Should I put this in the HR files?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Only if it comes with the chocolate." And just like that, the most chaotic interview in the company's history came to a close. No one quite understood what had just happened. But one thing was certain. Lily Collins wasn't like any candidate they'd ever seen. And for Nicholas Smith, that was exactly the point. Lily Collins started her first day at Smith Global with a solemn vow. Not to uphold the company mission, not to make a great first impression, but a personal pledge whispered to her reflection in the mirror. "Don't cause a fire, don't break anything, and for the love of God, don't call the CEO coffee guy." She wore her cleanest white blouse, well, least wrinkled, and a pencil skirt that was slightly too loose, held in place with a bobby pin and blind optimism. As she stepped into the building, the atmosphere was all too familiar. Polished shoes tapping in perfect rhythm, marble floors that echoed with authority, and an air of competence so thick it could crush dreams. This time, though, she had an employee badge. Misspelled, of course. Lily with 2 L's. "Close enough," she muttered, and marched into the elevator like she hadn't already tripped over her own feet that morning. Her desk was right outside Nicholas Smith's office. Prime location, if your definition of prime includes a front-row seat to judgment. Ethan, the previous assistant, had left her a neat little note. "Good luck. You'll need it." And beside it, a stack of documents to scan, organize, and email to the company's senior partners. Easy. Unless you're Lily Collins. She began scanning, but forgot one small detail. The pages were upside down. Financial charts now looked like alien language. Then, instead of attaching them to the folder marked Board Files Legal, she clicked on an old archive titled Annual Christmas Cards. The screen flashed. "Sent successfully," Lily exhaled. Nailed it. 5 minutes later, Ethan popped his head into Nicholas's office, pale as printer paper. "Sir, the entire board just received an email from Lily, with a subject line that ends in..." He cleared his throat. "Love you, Llama Queen." Nicholas looked up, silent. And then, he laughed. Not a snort, not a polite chuckle. A real, full-on laugh. Meanwhile, Lily sat at her desk, blushing hard enough to heat the building. "Just spreading some seasonal joy," she whispered. "Next mission, coffee. How hard could it be? Turns out very, if you manage to confuse the espresso machine with a rocket launcher." Steam burst from every valve. Milk frothed like a volcano. Then came the shrill beep, beep, beep of the 10th floor fire alarm. Employees scrambled. Lily stood in the break room, holding a mug of what looked like lava foam. "Maybe I overfrothed the milk?" Nicholas walked through the smoke, calm as ever. "Ms. Collins," he said, deadpan, "no one's ever triggered the fire alarm within the first hour of employment." She shrugged. "I aim to impress." Later, determined to redeem herself, Lily returned to her desk and tried organizing confidential files into the cabinet. Just one small hiccup. Her skirt got caught on the drawer handle. She tugged gently. Nothing. She yanked harder. Crack! The drawer burst open like a spring-loaded cannon, flinging papers into the air like office confetti. Lily sat on the floor, surrounded by a snowstorm of documents, looking like the lone survivor of a filing cabinet explosion. Nicholas happened to walk by. He paused, looked down at her. "Should I ask if you're okay?" he said. "Or if the drawer struck first?" Lily sighed. Mutual combat. No clear winner. By the end of the day, Lily was back at her desk, hair slightly frazzled, skirt wrinkled, mascara smudged from laughter, stress, or both. She glanced toward Nicholas's office. Through the glass, she could see him reviewing a document, the faintest smirk playing at the corner of his lips, like he'd just watched a sitcom he didn't want to admit he enjoyed. No complaints, no lectures, just a quiet glance. And a small nod. Lily straightened in her chair, tapped her fingers on the desk, and whispered, "Not fired yet. For Lily Collins, that counted as a win. And honestly, it kind of was. The private dining room of the Grayson Hotel was a place designed for power. Dark walnut paneling, a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation held captive, waiters who moved like synchronized whispers, and guests who didn't laugh so much as approve politely. Nicholas Smith didn't want to be here, but he had to. A business dinner with major investors, suit and silk energy, the kind of evening where every word was measured in return on investment. And then, Lily walked in. She wore red. Not a muted, tasteful red. No. A bold, possibly too bright, definitely on sale kind of red. The heels were borrowed. The clutch was missing. And the confidence? Well, it was a performance. Half courage, half caffeine. Nicholas stood as she approached, watching her take in the room like a cat on a marble floor. "You look determined," he said quietly. "Fake it till I make it," she grinned, "or at least until dessert." They were seated near the head of the table, across from a man who was not just any guest. He was Robert Delaney, a titan of finance, a man who'd made headlines with a single frown, and who for some reason refused to smile unless legally required. The dinner began. Polite, predictable, painfully precise. Small talk circled around like polite vultures. Wine was poured, then poured again. Forks barely clinked. And then, just as the second course arrived, Lily leaned slightly toward Robert Delaney and, without thinking, said with a gentle smile, "Excuse me, could I get another one of those little crab things, please, sir?" Robert blinked. The room froze. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else dropped their knife. A server stiffened like he'd been struck by lightning. Nicholas's hand stilled on his glass. Because Lily had just called the biggest investor in the room, Sir Waiter. The silence lasted a breath too long. Lily's eyes widened as realization hit her like a freight train in heels. But before she could mumble an apology or crawl under the table, Robert Delaney started to laugh. Not just a chuckle, not a polite smile, but a full-bodied, shoulders-shaking, chest-deep laugh. He wiped his eye, still chuckling, and said, "That's the first time I've laughed at a business dinner in 10 years." Laughter rippled through the table. The spell had broken. Suddenly, people breathed, smiled, loosened their ties. Even Nicholas, stunned, turned to Lily with something between disbelief and admiration in his eyes. "You," he said under his breath, "are the seasoning no one's ever dared to use." Lily, flushed but grinning, lifted her glass. "To crab things and chaos," she whispered. And just like that, the girl who didn't belong in that room became the reason everyone would remember it. Later that night, as headlines made their quiet rounds, and the internet snuck a leaked clip titled "Investor Called Waiter and Loved It," Nicholas sat back in the car beside her and said, "You realize that moment went viral already?" Lily blinked. "Wait, what?" "You're trending as the woman who made Robert Delaney laugh. That's practically a global phenomenon." Lily covered her face, groaning into her hands. But Nicholas just smiled to himself, watching her through the soft glow of the city lights. Somehow she kept rewriting all the rules, and he couldn't stop admiring how beautifully wrong she got it. The night air outside the corporate dinner still carried the buzz of laughter and candlelight. But in the car, things were quieter. Softer. As the city lights passed through the windows, flickering like fading applause, Lily and Nicholas sat side by side. No longer CEO and assistant, not quite friends, and definitely not strangers. She was still replaying the moment in her head. The accidental waiter comment, the roaring laughter, the looks from across the room. He was still watching her, not directly, but in the glass reflection, catching her half-smile as she wiped lipstick from the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand. "You know," he said finally, breaking the silence without looking at her, "you're kind of a public relations nightmare." Lily snorted. "Thank you. I'll put that on my resume, right under accidentally set off fire alarm during coffee break." Nicholas turned to her, resting one arm casually on the edge of the leather seat. There was amusement in his expression, but something else too. Something slower, quieter, like someone thinking ahead and trying not to show it. "I have a theory," he said, tilting his head. "Underneath all the llama queen energy, there might be a proper lady hidden somewhere." Lily raised an eyebrow. "A proper lady? Like sipping tea with pinkies out and walking without falling downstairs?" "Exactly," he replied. "A lady who can attend a gala without mistaking the senator for a valet." She narrowed her eyes, playful but curious. "Are you proposing an experiment?" "I'm proposing a bet." "Dangerous words," she said, now fully turned toward him. Nicholas leaned in slightly, enough that she caught the scent of his cologne. Clean, understated, expensive. 30 days. I train you to become a refined, elegant, socially acceptable woman. You make it through one major event without causing chaos, and I win. And if I win? He raised an eyebrow. Name your terms. She grinned like a kid discovering she'd been handed the controls to something way above her pay grade. If I stay exactly as I am, and still survive your fancy world without embarrassing myself, you buy me pancakes every morning for a week. Nicholas laughed, low and genuine. Pancakes? With real maple syrup, and whipped cream, and maybe a side of bacon on Fridays. Done, he said, holding out his hand. Lily stared at it for a second before shaking. His grip was warm, firm, and maybe just a little too long. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment, the space between jokes and jabs felt like something else. But Lily, ever the master of comic timing, cleared her throat and said, "Just know that if you try to make me wear beige, I'll set your espresso machine on fire." Nicholas smiled. "I wouldn't dream of it, but I will be scheduling etiquette lessons." "Perfect. Can't wait to teach the teacher." As the car turned the final corner toward her apartment, they both looked out opposite windows, hiding smiles they weren't ready to explain. It was just a game, just a bet. They both knew that, except maybe they didn't. Not really. Not anymore. The photo wasn't meant to be taken. It was a half-second captured outside the Grayson Hotel, Lily in her red dress, one heel slightly off the curb, Nicholas beside her, hand gently bracing her back as she steadied herself. Their heads tilted close, caught mid-laugh. The kind of laugh that doesn't usually happen at corporate events. By morning, it was everywhere. Ice King CEO seen laughing with clumsy assistant. Office romance or PR disaster. Who is the woman behind the coldest man on Wall Street? Nicholas Smith hated noise. And this was a hurricane of headlines, calls from shareholders, curious messages from board members, a voicemail from his mother that began with, "So, when were you going to tell me?" He closed the office blinds that day. Lily, across the hall, sat at her desk, scrolling through her phone, face pale. "I went viral again," she whispered, not sure if it was pride or horror she felt. By lunchtime, Nicholas called her in. The conversation was quiet, matter of fact. But underneath the tone was something else, an unspoken current neither of them wanted to touch yet. "Damage control," Nicholas said. Lily nodded. "We say we're dating. Just for a while. Until it blows over." A pause. Then, "Pretending?" she asked softly. He looked at her. Really looked. Yes, but something in his voice didn't match the word. The first few days of the relationship felt oddly natural. They walked side by side in the building, smiled a bit more when others were looking. Lily left a sticky note on his desk with a doodled heart and the words, "Lunch at 1, I'm stealing your fries." Nicholas responded with a dry, "I don't share food." But when 1:00 came, she was eating his fries anyway, and he let her. They sat close during meetings now, not touching, not speaking, but somehow aware of the space between them. How small it was, how it felt like static, but it was the hand-holding that changed everything. It happened one afternoon, outside the office, cameras nearby, a client approaching. Nicholas reached for her hand, smooth, practiced, rehearsed, but the second their fingers touched, Lily's eyes flicked up, and Nicholas hesitated. Just for a moment. Then his grip tightened. Not too much, but enough to say, "This isn't part of the plan anymore." And Lily didn't pull away. That evening, neither of them mentioned it, not in the car, not when she stepped out at her apartment building, not in the text he sent her later. "Dinner tomorrow. Casual. Don't be late." But both of them, lying awake in separate rooms, kept thinking about the same thing. That one small moment. That ridiculous thing called a hand. And how strange it felt to miss it. Because even if everything else was fake, that wasn't. Not anymore. The elevator wasn't supposed to stop. It had carried hundreds of people every day, up, down, without question. But that evening, as the doors slid shut with a soft mechanical sigh and the floor numbers blinked slowly upward, something faltered. A jolt. A flicker. Then silence. Lily looked up, blinking at the frozen panel. Oh no. Nicholas beside her checked his phone. No signal. Of course. Well, Lily muttered, this is intimate. Nicholas leaned against the mirrored wall, arms crossed, composed, but not cold. Don't worry, he said. The emergency call button works. But does it bring snacks? She asked, trying to smile. He chuckled. And then, like two people who'd run out of places to hide, they both sat on the floor. For a while, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that's rare in modern life. No meetings, no emails, no reporters. Just humming electricity and the sound of breath. Lily picked at a loose thread on her skirt. Truth or dare, she said, not really joking. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. That's how people in horror films die. She shrugged. We've already gone viral once. Might as well go out with a laugh. He considered, then nodded. Fine. Truth. What's the biggest lie you've told this week? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her for a long time. Not searching, just seeing all of her, her flushed cheeks, her hopeful eyes, the nervous twitch of her fingers. That it's just pretend? He said softly. Lily froze. Something in her chest pulled tight. She looked away, swallowed. Okay, she whispered. My turn. Truth or dare? He didn't hesitate. Dare. She smiled, nervous but steady. Describe your first impression of me. Nicholas tilted his head. That's not a dare. It is if you're scared to answer. His lips curled slightly. He exhaled slowly, then leaned his head back against the wall, gaze drifting toward the elevator ceiling like he could still see that first day. You were chaos in heels, hair everywhere, dressed backwards, arguing with your own reflection? A pause, then softer. And I thought, you might be the most alive thing I'd seen in a long time. Lily didn't laugh. Neither did he. There was a long silence, not awkward but weighty, like something unspoken had just landed between them, and neither knew what to do with it. Then, without another word, he reached for her hand. She didn't move away. When their eyes met, there was no let-up, no joke to break the tension. The world had already slowed down. There was nothing left to perform. He leaned in. She didn't stop him. Their lips met. Soft, unsure at first, then firmer. Honest. Not for a camera, not for anyone watching, just them. And when the elevator lights flickered back to life and the floor count resumed, they didn't move. They stayed still. Together. Because something had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. And both of them knew. That kiss wasn't part of the game anymore. Ashley Montgomery had always known how to play the long game. Her entrance wasn't loud. It never was. She arrived in heels that didn't make a sound, and a dress that shimmered like confidence. The kind of woman who smiled before she spoke, because by the time her words landed, she had already won. No one expected her return. But perhaps they should have. Nicholas hadn't seen her since the engagement was called off, a wound still raw beneath a polished exterior. And yet, there she was, back at Smith Global, walking through the lobby as if she still owned part of the building. What she brought with her wasn't just presence, it was ammunition. By noon, the headlines hit. Lily Collins, troubled past, dangerous future. Former employer confirms Lily involved in data leak that cost dozens their jobs. Nicholas Smith's new flame has a scandal he can't afford. The story was brutal, surgical, designed to gut. Ashley had handed it to the press herself, through the back channels she knew well. A carefully timed leak with just enough truth to sound believable and just enough venom to destroy. Inside the boardroom, chaos unfurled. Phones rang, emails pinged, investors demanded answers. PR scrambled to draft statements. Lily sat at her desk, frozen. The article stared back at her on the screen, her face stretched beside a headline that turned her life into clickbait. She didn't speak when Nicholas approached. "I'm handling it," he said quietly. His jaw was tight, his voice steady, but he hadn't met her eyes. Lily's throat tightened. "Is it true?" she asked. "Do you believe it?" He paused, just a second too long. That silence cut deeper than anything else. Because she had been let go from her last job. There had been a mistake, but it wasn't sabotage. It wasn't malicious. It was one file, mislabeled, a system she barely understood. She had cried for days. Not because she was fired, but because people had lost their jobs, people she cared about. She had tried to explain. No one had listened. Now it was happening again. And this time, Nicholas was the one hesitating. "I don't believe it was intentional," he said finally. But it wasn't enough. Not for a woman who had worked twice as hard to be seen as more than a punchline. Not after clawing her way back to a shred of self-respect. Not after he kissed her in an elevator, and then doubted her in a boardroom. She stood up slowly. "So that's where we are," she said, her voice low but clear. "You'll fix the mess, but not because you trust me, because you have to." "Lily," she shook her head. "No. Let me guess. You'll schedule another damage control dinner, smile for the cameras, and call it strategy." Nicholas reached for her arm. "Stop. You know this isn't what I wanted." She stepped back. "What you wanted?" "Nicholas, you're the CEO. You don't get the luxury of wanting. You get to choose. And you didn't choose me." The room went silent. Outside the glass walls, the city buzzed on, oblivious to the moment something cracked between them. That afternoon, Lily disappeared from the office. No goodbye. No dramatic exit, just an empty desk, a missing name tag, and a single folded note left on Nicholas's chair. "You believed the headline. That's all I needed to know." Across town, Ashley sipped champagne in a rooftop lounge. She hadn't just thrown a stone. She'd watched it hit. And for now, that was enough. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't control, was that Lily Collins didn't break. She burned, and soon, she'd rise. The apartment was quiet. No traffic hum, no phone buzzing, no background laughter from sitcom reruns, just Megan, standing in the kitchen barefoot, stirring a pot of something warm on the stove. And Lily, curled on the couch in a hoodie too big and a silence too heavy. Outside the window, the city kept spinning. But in this little corner of it, time softened. Slowed. Megan didn't ask what happened. She'd seen enough headlines, heard enough half-sentences in Lily's voice that cracked at the edges. She knew. She set a bowl in front of her friend without a word, sat down beside her, and waited. Lily tried to eat. 2 bites in, her spoon clinked against the side of the bowl, and her hand dropped. "I think I'm done," she whispered, "with everything. I'm tired of proving I'm not the mess they say I am. Maybe they're right." Megan's fingers tightened around her own mug. She didn't speak right away. She rarely did. Megan had always been the calm in Lily's chaos, the listener when words failed. "I never told you," she said finally. "Why I stopped designing." Lily blinked, caught off guard. "I got into Parsons," Megan continued. "Top of my class, had a spot waiting, and I walked away from it." Lily sat up slightly. "Why?" Megan smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My mom got sick. My brothers were still in school, and someone had to stay, so I stayed, took the steady job, learned to breathe small." She looked at Lily then. Really looked, eyes soft but steady. "But you, Lily, you trip over your own feet, forget your own lunch, and say the wrong thing in the loudest room, yet somehow you always live out loud. You're messy, but you're real. And that's braver than anything I ever did." Lily's eyes welled. She looked down, biting her lip to keep it all in. But the tears slipped through anyway. Quiet, like confession. "I don't feel brave," she whispered. "I feel broken, like they finally cracked something that won't glue back." Megan reached out, gently tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear, like she had when they were in college, and Lily cried over a failed audition, or a love letter she never sent. "Then rest," Megan said. "You don't always have to fight, not with me." Lily exhaled, like she'd been holding it for days. She leaned into Megan's shoulder, the weight of everything finally allowed to be heavy. For a moment, they sat like that. 2 women, 2 paths, tangled but steady. No drama, no fanfare, just the kind of love that never needed to be loud to be lasting. And in the stillness, Lily whispered, "I think I'll quit, Meg." Megan nodded, not to stop her, but to say, "Whatever comes next, I'm staying." Because every hurricane needs a lighthouse. And for Lily Collins, Megan had always been that light, steady, quiet, and burning just enough to find her way home. Nicholas Smith's office had never felt this quiet. The phones had stopped ringing. No footsteps echoed in the hallway. Even the city beyond the windows seemed to hold its breath. On the center of his polished desk sat a single white envelope. His name was handwritten on the front. No flourish, no loops, just clean, simple strokes, like someone who didn't need to say more than necessary. He stared at it for a long time before touching it. almost as if opening it might make something final. Inside, a folded sheet of plain paper. No greeting, no sign-off, just a few lines, a few words, but they hit harder than anything she'd ever said aloud. If, after all the noise fades and the silence settles, you still choose me, come find me. If not, pretend I was never here. Lily, that was it. No tears, no dramatic goodbye, no final kiss under streetlights, just an empty chair, a desk cleared of her chaos, and a man sitting alone, bent forward over his desk like the weight of the letter was too much to hold upright. Nicholas had survived corporate meltdowns. He'd watched billion-dollar deals fall apart. He'd stood tall in boardrooms filled with fire and scrutiny. But nothing had ever made him feel small. Until now. Because Lily hadn't left angry. She hadn't accused. She hadn't begged. She had just walked away. Quietly. And somehow that silence screamed louder than anything else. He clenched the paper in his hand, looked up, but the room didn't respond. Lily Collins was gone. And for the first time in his perfectly calculated life, Nicholas Smith didn't know. If he still had the chance to bring her back, the gala was everything it was supposed to be. Chandeliers sparkled. Champagne flowed. Guests moved like clockwork in tailored suits and designer gowns. The air hummed with polite laughter, muted strings, and the ever-present scent of money and perfume. On stage, Nicholas Smith stood mid-speech, composed, brilliant, untouchable. The perfect CEO, the perfect son, the perfect man. And then the doors opened, all heads turned. She didn't walk in like she'd come to impress. She walked in like she belonged. Lily Collins, hair swept up in a soft, chaotic bun that let a few curls rebel. A deep navy dress, bold, elegant, and unmistakably worn backward. The tag swayed just slightly near her collarbone, like a secret she no longer cared to hide. A few gasps, one or two chuckles, but mostly silence. Because even in her imperfections, no, because of them, she glowed. Lily walked through the crowd slowly, chin high, eyes forward. Not challenging, not apologizing, just being. A declaration without saying a word. I'm not perfect, but I am real. And something in Nicholas's chest cracked open. Mid-sentence, he stopped speaking. The microphone hummed quietly as the room fell still. Then, with no warning, no script, no calculated pause, he stepped away from the podium. Off the stage, down the steps, toward her, toward the only chaos he'd ever wished would stay. He reached her in the middle of the ballroom. Her eyes searched his face, waiting for judgment. But all she found was clarity. Nicholas turned toward the room, toward the partners, the press, the investors, all the people he had spent a lifetime trying to impress, and spoke into the hush. We don't need the most polished people in this world. We need the most authentic, the ones who trip, spill, mess up, and still show up. He turned back to her, voice lower now, but certain. No notes, no filter. This woman, she makes me want to stop performing. She makes me want to live honestly, to love honestly. Then, in front of everyone, he knelt down. Right there, in his tailored suit, on marble floors meant for the elite, held her hand with a quiet reverence, and said, Lily Collins, would you do me the honor of completely ruining my perfectly organized life? For a beat, she didn't answer. Then came the smile, wide, trembling, so purely Lily. And the room exhaled all at once. Only if I get to keep wearing my dresses backward? Nicholas laughed, a full, unrestrained sound. Deal. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed, but none of it mattered, because in that moment, amid the glitter and noise, two imperfect people stood at the center of the storm they created, and found stillness. Real love had never looked so unpolished or so perfect. The cake collapsed before the ceremony even started. Not in slow motion, not with gasps and desperate grabs, just a sudden thud as the three-tiered wonder slid sideways and landed in a lopsided pile of frosting and fondant at Megan's feet. "Perfect," Lily muttered, deadpan. "Just how I imagined." Megan, bless her loyal soul, was too busy trying to rescue a fondant flower to respond. Then came the music, or what was supposed to be music. Megan, always supportive, never quite on key, launched into her version of the song Lily had chosen for the aisle walk. Half a beat off, a full octave high, and delivered with the determined warble of someone singing more from heart than talent. Lily couldn't help it. She laughed. So did Nicholas, standing at the makeshift altar under a canopy of fairy lights strung up the night before, half crooked, half charming. He looked down at his vows, carefully folded in his jacket pocket, and promptly read the wrong page. "I swear to support your dreams, and learn to dance on TikTok if that's what it takes." The guests blinked. Someone in the back snorted. Lily covered her mouth, eyes wide. Nicholas looked up, not embarrassed, just smiling. "Wrong page," he said. "But I stand by it." Then it was her turn. She took a breath, looked at him. No script, no paper, just Lily, just real. "I am a mess," she said softly. "A walking disaster. I trip over nothing. I speak before I think, and I've ruined every white shirt you've ever owned." Laughter rippled. "But you've never once asked me to be less." She swallowed. "I'm a storm, Nicholas. But you're the only umbrella I ever needed." Nicholas stepped closer, voice low but steady. "And you, Lily Collins, you are the reason my perfectly planned life finally felt worth the chaos. No thunderous applause, no orchestra swell, just hands held, just two hearts finding their own rhythm. And when they kissed, surrounded by spilled frosting, a singing best friend, and crooked lights, it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that, finally, was enough." Lily and Nicholas danced in the middle of the wedding hall, where the cake had collapsed, the lights flickered, and the music was completely offbeat. A tablecloth was tangled around someone's heel, soap bubbles drifted by their feet, and a kid giggled as he chased them around the dance floor. But right there, Lily laughed, and Nicholas looked at her as if that smile was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. No one told them to dance. There was no perfect cue. Just two people choosing to hold hands in the middle of life's beautiful mess. Because in the end, happiness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from someone who makes you want to stay and laugh, even when the world is falling apart. What did you think of the story? Comment just one word. Hurricane. If you followed Lily and Nicholas all the way through this whirlwind of a love story, and tell us, how would you rate this story from 1 to 10? We'd love to hear your thoughts. The world can spin, things can fall apart, but sometimes all you need is one person who chooses to stand by your side. Not to fix you, not to change you, just to stay. Lily isn't perfect, Nicholas isn't cold anymore, but together they created a kind of love anyone who's ever been hurt can believe in again. Don't forget to hit like if this story made you smile at any point. Tap subscribe to discover more heartfelt, humorous, and honest stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single beautiful moment. Even if it comes from a girl wearing her dress backward. And if you've ever felt like you didn't quite fit into the world, just remember, maybe you're simply waiting for someone who fits your heart perfectly.